Okay, so in the previous chapter, in chapter 12, Abbas had the idea to start a shoe shining business in the hotel, and Murat says yes. So Murat goes out and buys a nice set like this with a brush, with the liquid, with the polish to make them look nicer. And then it's also his birthday, and he doesn't tell anyone in the hotel, but his parents phone him. He finally speaks to his mum, and his dad's really proud of him. So he actually goes to bed at the end of chapter 12 very happy. Let's look at chapter 13, page 203. During the next 4 days, I tried to occupy myself, be busy, with as much work as I possibly could. The only incident worth reporting was that I lost my first match of backgammon. Remember, backgammon is the game that he always plays, this one here. Okay, very, very popular game. So he lost his first match of backgammon. It was close, but I was outplayed by a better player. Luckily, Murat had not put a lot of money on me, as he knew that I was the weaker player. I think he hoped for a miracle. The shoe shine business was doing very well, and to annoy me, Murat kept commenting on how it had been all his idea. I'd always point out that he had to trust me to give him his fair share of the money, and he would smile. He never tried to check whether I was stealing from him, and of course I didn't. I did not share the tips with him, so I always made more than him anyway. I was not in top form because my birthday was still at the back of my mind. My mother's voice had been a reminder of what I was missing by being in Istanbul in Turkey. Remember, his mother and dad are in Iran. The day finally arrived when I had to go back to page 204, to go back to the consulate, the embassy, this building. I came downstairs in my best clothes and gave my own shoes a good shine. In the same way I could drink free tea, I could polish my shoes for free as well. I had decided this was the day when I would take a risk. Murat, I said, do you have some of the lira I asked you to put in the safe for me? I have all of it, he said with a smile. Do you want it? Yes, please. Without hesitation, he opened the safe, and there was my pile. It had built up slowly as I had added my earnings to it. I took the liras. Murat? Yes. Can you put some of my dollars in there? Sure, he said. How many? Around 800, I said softly. He looked at me very coolly and winked. No problem, little man. He took the money from me, put it in an envelope, and wrote my name on it. Then he put it in the safe where my Turkish liras had been. I just did not want to worry any more about losing the money. I had $400 or $500 more hidden in my room, and the rest on me. I began to walk off to the kitchen to get some tea when Murat stopped me. Oh, by the way, are you going to write a letter today? No, I said. I will speak to my parents tonight. He had started to get on my case because I had stopped writing as many letters as I used to. It was nice of him to do that. He said that it was important to write letters to one's folks, to your parents. Murat's own parents lived in a village a long way from Istanbul, and he told me that ever since I had arrived, he also started to write to them. As I sipped my tea, I wondered what was going to happen at the consulate. I hoped that I would be lucky, as I was on my last 2 visits, in finding someone to translate for me. I wondered if I would see Terina there. I knew that it wasn't likely, but it was possible, as she too had been asked to return with her papers in 10 days. I got off the bus outside the consulate. Both the armed guards from my visit were there, and with gentle smiles they opened the gates without looking at my passport. It was a really busy day there. I could not see a single empty seat. Now I was less worried about finding a translator and more worried about how long I would have to wait. As I went towards the ticket machine to take a number, a series of loud taps stopped me. They were coming from the booth of my friend. He was waving at me like a crazy baboon. I could not understand what he wanted me to do. He began to point to a door behind the glass booths, which only the consulate staff used. So I started to walk towards it. I saw the man smile from behind his counter. The more he smiled, the faster I walked. I stood at the door waiting. Almost everyone in the consulate was now staring at me and obviously whispering about page 206, obviously whispering about me under their breath quietly. I was beginning to panic. Who would translate for me? The door opened and my friend guided me through with a welcoming gesture. Behind the booths was a fantastically air-conditioned, open-plan office with computers and photocopying machines. The desks were all immaculate and clean, and the people working there were dressed in elegant business clothes. The carpet looked soft and fresh as it had been shampooed only the day before, and there was a rosy smell of air freshener. I followed the man through another door at the back of the office, which led to a long corridor with polished floorboards instead of carpeting. There was a heavy wooden bench outside, imposing oak doors in the center of the corridor. At the far end, I could see the entrance to a grand foyer. The man indicated and showed that I should sit on the bench and wait. He spoke too, but I only understood the gestures, the things he was doing with his hands. I sat staring around me. There were huge paintings, bigger than me, of horses and foxes hanging on either sides of wooden doors. These oil paintings were none like I had ever seen before. I must have waited for over an hour, and I did not see anyone at all in that time, and I began to panic that they had forgotten about me. Suddenly, a man who looked very Persian appeared and walked towards me. He smiled at me but did not say anything. The man knocked on the large doors next to the bench, and a loud, resonant voice responded, "Enter." The man went in, and once again I waited alone. Then the door opened, and a man of considerable stature, a big man, and class, stood before me. Immediately I rose to my feet. He had blonde hair that was turning white, and the wrinkles in his skin gave him the look of a wise, intelligent man. His small, piercing blue eyes looked out from behind delicate metal-framed glasses, and he was dressed in a finely tailored beige suit, a salmon pink shirt, and a silk tie with a perfect knot, so a gentleman, an older man. He offered his hand. "Hello," he said in a deep voice. As I understood, I responded in English. "Hello, my name is Abbas Kazaruni." The man chuckled and laughed. Then he made a remark to the other man who had entered the room before me. I could not understand what he said, but they both laughed. The Persian-looking man also came up to me and shook my hand. "Hello, Abbas," he said in Farsi. "I am a translator. They were expecting you, and they asked me to come in and to help you." "Thank you," I said in English. I was still completely awed, in amazement by this magnificent, incredible office. There were old-school photos on the walls, and more oil paintings and souvenirs from all over the world. There were photographs of the distinguished-looking man with the Prime Minister of England, Margaret Thatcher, this lady here. Very important in England during this time, 1980s. I knew who she was because my father always talked about her. He would tell me how Margaret Thatcher was tough and would tolerate no nonsense. On a mahogany desk lay fancy fountain pens and beautifully framed photos of what must have been the man's family. Page 208. The man in the beige suit gestured to me to sit down, and he turned to examine a sheaf of papers. I recognized some of them as the documents I had given to my consulate friend 10 days before. He then spoke very quickly and firmly to the translator, who made a few notes and turned to me. "This, Abbas," he said, "is the man in charge of the consulate. He is a very important man, the consul." "I can tell. He does not usually get personally involved in visa cases, but on hearing your story, he decided to look at it himself." "Thank you," I said again in English. This was making the man smile. It was the core of my 10-word English vocabulary. "He says it is important that you do not lie about anything, because that would mean that you will never get a visa for England." "I know, I told the other man only the truth," I said firmly. The translator and the consul exchanged a few more words and sentences before the translator turned to me again. As he was about to speak, a lady knocked on a side door to the office and carried in walking a tray. On it was a glass of water, hot chocolate in a fine china cup, and cookies, biscuits. She gave the water to the translator and then sat down the tray in front of me. I did not touch anything. The consul says that this is all for you, he said, smiling. He says it's his son's favorite. With that, the consul picked up one of the photographs on his desk and showed me a picture of his wife and son. Hesitantly, I picked up the cup, making sure that I did not spill any of it. It was delicious, and I downed it in a few gulps. Then the translator got us back to business. The consul says that he knows you have told the truth so far, as your story has been verified. He just wants to caution you to be careful for the future. Okay. He says that he wanted to meet you, and he is pleased that he has. He says that he likes you. Thank you. Again, I spoke in English to the consul. He nodded at me. The translator continued. He wants to help you, but he cannot guarantee anything. Do you have any questions? I thought about it before asking him. Yes, I want to know how long these things take. The men conferred and spoke for a few minutes, and then the translator told me. The consul says that there is no set time for these things, and he cannot give you a specific date, because he does not want to disappoint you. However, he does say that he has a boy very close in age to you, and he knows that he would not want him to be alone in Istanbul. He says that he will try his best for you, but again, he wants you to know that there is no surety. After a point, he cannot help, and it's not in his hands. Thank you very much, I said to the consul. He smiled at me again, and from his eyes, I could tell that he genuinely did like me. Page 210. So what should I do now? I asked. You have to go now and come back in 6 weeks, the translator said. 6 weeks? I was horrified. Yes, I'm afraid so, he said. This is the day you should come back. He handed me a piece of paper with a date and time written on it. I will be here again to translate for you, he continued. They have the hotel details in case they need to get in touch with you before that. Thank you. Both men stood up, and I immediately stood too. The consul walked up to me and shook my hand again and said something to the translator. The consul says to look after yourself, and he hopes to see you soon. Thank you. With that, the consul accompanied me to the door, where a lady was waiting to take me back to the main consulate area. As I left, I took one last look at that splendid and nice room. Walking out of the consulate, I did not know whether to be happy or sad. I had to wait 6 weeks, but the most important man in the consulate had taken a liking to me. I stood waiting for the bus, famished, hungry, and wanting to get back to the hotel. There was only about an hour of sunlight when the bus arrived. In the meantime, I was thinking about how my father would react when I told him that what had taken place. He might order me to return to Iran and try to save the rest of his money. It made my head hurt, to think of all the different scenarios that each day brought with it. By the time the bus dropped me off at the marketplace, it was almost dark. The streets in my hotel was unlit, there was no lights, and I had never walked in it in the dark before, and it scared me. In my room, I could hear all sorts of noises coming from the street, but now, as I walked along, it seemed terribly quiet. The only lights lit my way now, and then there were the few houses and flats or apartments. Finally, I spied my hotel and decided to make a dash for it and run. I landed on the steps, out of breath, panting. To my great surprise, I saw Murat in my place behind the box, cleaning someone's shoes. He was much too big for the child-sized stool, the chair, and I laughed at him as I walked through the door. Oi, where are you going? He asked. Don't you want to carry on for me? No, I have to go and get some food first. What about when I get hungry? He asked. Do you see me leave the post to go and get food? No, I said, darting out of the lobby anyway. I hurried up to my room, changed my clothes, and checked to make sure that my money was still there. Then I took a few hundred liras with me and I returned downstairs. As I did, I saw Murat walking out of the kitchen. He burst out laughing. What? I asked, page 212. Your jeans. I looked down at them and noticed that they looked a little odd and different. I don't understand. Oh, you are not the first, he said knowingly, and certainly you won't be the last. What? When you washed your jeans, you didn't rub them together hard enough. That means the lighter parts are now cleaner than the darker parts. Oh, I said. I felt a little stupid. But to be honest, I was more interested in getting something to eat than worrying about my pants. I had just walked out of the lobby when Murat chased after me. "Phone call, Abbas!" he screamed. "Already?" I asked as I ran to the booth. "Abbas," my father said, "how did it go?" "Hi, Baba," I said. "Oh, well, it went fine, I think." "What happened?" "Well, I met with the guy in charge of the consulate." "The ambassador?" "I think so," I said. "They called him something else. Apparently he does not usually get involved in these kind of things." "Why did he meet you?" "Because he wanted to see me for himself, and he likes me. He said that he would try to help me if he can." "That is great news." "But he said that there is no guarantee," I explained, "and that I have to go back in 6 weeks." 6 weeks? "He said it takes time," I said. "But if they get any news before then, they will call me at the hotel." "But, Abbas, what are you going to do for 6 weeks on your own?" "I've been here almost 3 weeks already, Baba," I said. "I'll be okay. Besides, the man said that he has a son my age, and he doesn't like the thought of me being here alone, so he will try his best for me." "He said that?" "Yes." "How did you speak to him?" "He had a translator for me." "Great! They got a translator for you. That is good news." "So I will just wait it out." We will see." I did not know what he meant by that, but I was almost hoping he would tell me to come back to Tehran. "Is Maman there?" "Yes, hold on." His response took me by surprise. "Hello, my darling, how are you?" "I'm good, Maman," I said, all cheered up and happy. "How are you?" "Oh, missing my baby." "Maman," I said, almost blushing. "My man, sorry," she corrected herself. Page 214. "Yes, I went to the consulate and saw the most important man there. He said he would try to help me." "I heard, sweetness," she said proudly. "Well done." She said exactly what I wanted to hear her say. "Thank you, Maman." "Abbas," she said, "what do you do with your time when you're not alone, when you're not at the consulate?" Had she guessed I was up to something? "I watch a lot of TV and play backgammon." "You do, huh? Well, you take care of yourself, Abbas. Don't get into any trouble because you have a lot of time on your hands now." "I won't, Maman. I'll be careful." "Good boy," she said. "I know you will." "Well, you better go. The bill will shoot up soon." "We'll ring again soon," she said. The phone clicked. When I came out of the booth, I saw that Murat was not at reception. I presumed that he was in the kitchen or in the television lounge. I did not really want to leave the hotel, but it had been more than 24 hours since I had last had a meal. I decided to walk as quickly, as briskly as I could to the corner shop. The street seemed ghostly, a wind whistling ominously down it. Deep inside, I felt something was wrong. However, by now I was more than halfway to the shop. I thought I should carry on. The only thing that I could see was the light of the corner shop. Out of nowhere, an arm reached out, held me by the neck, and pulled me into a narrow, dark alleyway. I froze, terrified. A thin, sharp-looking man with a heavy cloak or blanket over his shoulder smacked my head hard against the wall and held a knife to my throat. He had small, beady eyes. As he breathed heavily into my face, the smell of alcohol made me feel sick. He whispered in Turkish and kept showing me a small bag. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "This is all I have." I opened up my hands to reveal around 250 lira, which was nothing. Either the fact that I did not understand him or that I did not have enough money angered him. His voice began to get louder. I kept repeating, "This is all I have," in Farsi, and he seemed to get more and more angry and aggravated. Still holding the knife to my throat, to my neck, to my face, he began to search my pockets. When he found nothing, he got more angry, more frustrated. He picked me up and threw me against the opposite wall of the alley. My head hurt from the second pounding. He followed me, held me by the neck, and again pressed the knife hard against my throat. I was shaking and looking up at him when he suddenly punched me across my face. I was sure I was going to die. I closed my eyes and felt the knife blade going a little deeper. All I could think about was that I didn't want to die here, in this unfamiliar city, down a dark road where my parents would never find me. Page 216. My eyes were still closed when out of nowhere my name echoed down the alley. Abbas? 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 I was sure I was imagining it, but when I opened my eyes, there was Murat. For a few seconds, my attacker stared at him. Murat stood his ground. Then the attacker turned and ran down the alley. Immediately I got up, pretending I was okay, but my heart was racing 1,000 miles an hour. I stumbled into the street. Murat reached out to gently touch my shoulder and my neck. It was not a deep cut, but blood was dripping from it. My head was aching and hurting too, and as I touched it, I realized the back of my head was bleeding as well. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. "Are you all right?" Murat asked. I saw him stare down at my jeans. I had wet myself, peed myself from fear. I could only nod. If I had spoken, I would have become hysterical, unable to talk from crying. This was the only time Murat ever saw me cry, but he behaved like a true gentleman. "It's okay, little man," he said softly. "Tell me what you wanted from the shop, and I will get it for you. I shook my head to show that I didn't want anything. "You go back," he said. "I know what you eat. I'll get it now." I nodded to say thank you. As I turned around, he called to me again. "Little man." "Yes," I sobbed. "Don't worry. No one will know about this unless you want them to." He stood there and watched me walk all the way to the hotel, then turned and walked down the alley to the shop for me. In those few minutes, I had experienced the two extremes of life, evil and good. As I approached the lobby, I checked to make sure that no one was there and then ran up to my room. I did not want anyone else to see me like this in this state. I could not believe how close I had come to death. I wanted to be home now more than ever. I wanted to give up. I had tried my hardest, but it wasn't good enough. I thought about calling Baba. This had been a stupid idea, and my father should have known better than to send me to a city like Istanbul alone. I cried as I took off my clothes. My neck was bleeding a lot worse than my head, even though my head was hurting more. I stood in the shower and stared at myself in the mirror. The left side of my face was swollen, getting bigger from when he was punched. What have I done to deserve this? I kept thinking to myself. After my shower, I decided I would call home. I sat in my pajamas on the side of my bed, not knowing what to do. My neck had stopped bleeding, but my head was still hurting. There was a knock at the door. I did not respond until Murat called out. "Abbas, it's me." I opened the door and let him in. "Here," he said. "I've got some bread, cheese, yogurt, water, Coke, and some chocolate for you." Page 218. I did not want to argue with him over what I did or didn't want, so I reached for my money on the bedside cabinet. "Don't be silly," he said softly. "It's on me." "No," I said, "take it." "Don't make me throw you out of my hotel," Murat said with a smile. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "It's nothing," he said. "Oh, here, this is for you too." He held out some ice. "Put it on your head and face. Do you need to see a doctor?" "No," I said firmly. "Okay," he said. "Do you need anything else?" "No, thank you." God must have been watching me that night. I knew that Murat never left the hotel on his shift, but this time, he told me, he had ran out of cigarettes and he did not want anyone to fetch or buy them for him. So he had gone out while I had been on the phone. On his way back, he had come upon the tacker and me. "You rest well," he said, "and if you want anything, just let me know." Murat left and I was alone once again. I locked the door and stared at the food. I could not eat anything. When the man had slapped me in the marketplace, I had thought it could not get any worse, but it had. I sat on the bed crying for what seemed like hours. I eventually found myself half asleep on the floor. I was glad that my parents had not called, because I could not have controlled myself. I decided that I was not going to tell them. They would only blame themselves. I woke up the next morning around 4 o'clock, a nightmare about the previous night making my head spin and hurt. I could not get back to sleep, but I did not get up. When the cleaner knocked on the door, I did not let her come in. I stayed in bed and stared at the wall. I did not want to speak to anyone, and there was no way I had the energy to work. Murat did come up and speak to me through the door, but I told him that I wanted to rest. By the end of that day, I ate a little bread, which made me feel a little better. For 3 days I stayed in my room, away from the outside world. The only reason I decided to go out again was because I thought I would run out of money if I stopped working. The swelling on my face had gone down somewhat, and my head was not pounding and hurting as much as it had been. I promised myself that I would go downstairs the following morning. It's the end of chapter 13. So poor Abbas went to the consulate and he met this very nice man who's trying to help him get his visa, but now he has to wait 6 weeks. He arrives at home at night. He then decides he wants to go out and get food, and as he's leaving to get food, he gets attacked by a man who smells of alcohol and puts a knife into his neck a little bit. He then punches him, and then luckily Murat saves the day. Understandably, Abbas spends 3 days in his room, worried and upset. So that's the end of chapter 13.